Okay, good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. I'll start the meeting since we have a quorum. We're still waiting for a couple of other members to join us. But there's a certain amount of boilerplate to these meetings, so perhaps they're waiting until that's over. This is a statement I'm required to read as part of the governor's rules for holding remote meetings. My name is Rick Smith. I'm chairman of the Noank Zoning Commission. I'll be hosting the meeting because our normal technology wizard is otherwise occupied. Anyone who speaks should state their names prior to speaking each time. Participants in this meeting will be the commission members and staff, persons with applications for architectural design review that have been previously submitted for consideration, and the commission's counsel if he joins the meeting. Later, we will also have the zoning enforcement officer. At the discretion of the chairman and with the concurrence of the commission, elected alternate members of the commission may participate during old business on discussions of the short-term rental issue. Participants who would like to comment on an item or share a screen item should indicate such by using the raised hand icon at the bottom of the screen, or more easily by raising your hand visually in front of the screen. I'll recognize the person. They can have the opportunity to speak. Otherwise, try and keep your microphones muted in the event that there's feedback. If not, we can leave them on. Procedurally, to offer a motion or second a motion, commissioners will physically raise their hand to be acknowledged by the chair. Voting on will be by waving our hands in front of the screen, and I will call the vote as it happens. The public can participate in the meeting as observers, and at the start of the meeting during the general comments section of the agenda, at which issues not otherwise on the agenda can be raised for future commission consideration. During the general comments section, a member of the public wishing to speak will be asked to raise his or her hand, and hopefully you'll get my attention. Everyone, commissioners and staff, try hard to identify yourself before speaking so other people who may only be listening in and not seeing the screens will know who's speaking. Members of the public can also submit comments by writing to the commission after the meeting for consideration on any item discussed tonight. Finally, a recording of tonight's meeting will be posted on the Town of Groton's website within 7 days of the meeting. So that is that. Where's the recording? Good. I'm going to call the roll now. I'll call people's name and they will wave their hand so you can see who they are, because everyone sees everyone else differently on the screen, so you can't go left to right and so forth. Blake Powell, Beth Steele, Dana Oviatt. Okay, those are 3 commissioners and myself, Rick Smith. Probably be joined in a bit by Art Tanner. We also have an alternate present, Lynn Marshall, who is not on screen yet. So maybe there's a technical difficulty there. Okay. We do not have a public hearing tonight, so we can skip that part of the agenda. The next section is for public comment for general comments, issues that are not otherwise on the agenda. Does anyone have a comment on something not on the agenda? I don't quite know how people who are audio only identify us, but I'm going to unmute everyone for a moment. Just great. I have no control on. Beth, would you unmute your microphone? I can't seem to control that part the way Larry set that up. Yeah,
okay, I just did that.
I'm going to have to ask people to unmute. Okay. If Robert Accolini, I hope I pronounced that properly, Penelope Fox, if either of you would like to speak on subjects not on the agenda, you'll have to unmute the little red icon in the lower left of your block on the screen. Unmute that and I'll recognize you and you can speak. Okay,
Good,
Penny
Rick. This is
Fox.
Penelope Fox.
Yep.
No comments. I'm just an observer.
Oh, okay. Then I'll mute you back up so you can listen without a lot of feedback. Thank you. Okay. Next item is the election of the vice chairman. We do this once a year in November. We need to have at least four of the regular members present, and we do have that. So is there a nomination for vice chairman? Blake? Whoop, you're going to have to unmute. There you go.
I'm happy to nominate Beth as long as she's willing to do it.
Okay, nomination for Beth Steele. Is there a second? Dana Oviatt, second motion. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, I see 3. You're allowed to vote for yourself, Beth.
Okay, fine.
All right, it's unanimous. Beth is elected again for vice chairman. Thank you for your willingness to serve. Okay, now applications for design review. And this is where it's going to get a little bit hairy because I'm going to be juggling with all balls in the air because of Larry's absence. So give me a moment to make sure I start to have Peter, I'm sorry, Ryan Baller, there you are. You're going to have to hit that unmute button so you can speak. See the little red icon in the lower left of the screen? Just click on it.
Yep.
Okay, there you are. Good. All right. Now let me see. I have to do that. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so this is the application of Ryan Baller, 40 Elm Street for design review to build a 25-foot by 38-foot 3-car garage. I'm going to skim quickly through all of the pages so you see what's there, and then I'll go back to the beginning and Ryan will be able to present his application. The checkoff list, everything checked off, Bill signed it. Here's his application. Site plan, his property. You'll see in a minute where next is where the garage would go. Floor plan, we can explain that if you have questions. Facade facing toward the west, I believe, or I'll let him explain all of that when we get to it. Side view, another side view. Roof view with skylights. Now here are the comparative properties around the site. Okay. Okay, then Ryan, you're on. Give us a presentation of what you intend to do. And I understand you spoke to Bill tonight, so you understand the things you need to be prepared to answer.
Yes. It's Ryan Ballard here, and looking to put in, as I said, a 25 by 38-foot 3-car garage. If you scroll to the next page, it'll be used for a workshop and storage of a boat. And this just shows the plot plan, kind of. This shows where the garage will be located in the back corner of the lot with the proposed gravel driveway. And you can go to the next one now, next page.
Yeah, hold on just one second here. Okay. Um, okay,
This
I
shows
don't know if I
the,
can reduce the size of that a little. Let me try. There we go.
this shows the floor plan. So the wall on the left side, which would be the west, that would face Elm Street. And the larger garage door on the top, that would face towards Mosier Ave. And then just the entry door and a couple of windows on the opposite wall of that. This is that was the front view.
Yeah.
Yep, facing Elm Street. Stone veneer on the outside. Roof shingles will be the same to match the house. That'll be the side that faces the neighbor's house. That'll be the side that would face Mosier Ave with a larger garage door. And that's the rear that faces the neighbor's house on Mosier Ave with the 3 skylights and a roof.
Okay. Okay, commissioners, any questions on this?
Rick, can you go back to the checklist page again?
Sure.
What does item 5 say?
An original 7 copies of photos or drawing of the current structure. If it was going to be a remodel and it says doesn't exist, it will be new. Yeah. Okay, questions? Dana, you had one?
Dana, what does the stone veneer look like?
I've got, it's gonna be a roughly a Connecticut fieldstone. I'll hold the picture up if you can see it maybe, but
Got it, thanks.
Other questions? That stone facade is an interesting point for me to ask. The architectural design review is intended to try and make a structure, particularly a new structure, fit in with the surrounding properties and structures. You got a lot of shingled and clapboard structures all around you, and this one looks very different. Any particular reason you're going for that look?
the reason I chose the stone was I wanted it to just kind of blend into the landscape in the back there, and not stick out. And as the Noank Historical Society building on Sylvan is also clad in stone on the exterior.
Other questions? One of the reasons we have people submit photos from properties within 100 or 150 feet, whatever it is for the very reason to try and get structures to look like the surrounding ones. I understand there are other buildings elsewhere in Noank that may have stone facades. This is uncharacteristic of the neighborhood. I guess I'll say that without commenting one way or another. Other comments, commissioners? I'm clicking back and forth here to try and see if any other commissioners have joined, but I don't see any. All right. Beth?
I know this is probably the reason it's here before us, but the size of the structure and the ground coverage, that's all okay with Bill, I guess. I mean, he's.
You know, when he
Yeah.
signs off on this form, implicit in it is he's checked all those things out. So I hope he's done the proper due diligence, and, you know, lot coverage doesn't seem to be a problem because it's such a large lot. But, you know, we clearly have to trust that he checked into that when he reviewed this whole thing. That's why he has the sign off for,
Can I just inquire of the applicant how big his lot is?
The lot is 24,577 square feet.
What's that in acreage? Like,
I believe it's 0.58 maybe.
it's a little over half.
Yeah.
Just eyeballing. Here's the property line on the south. Here's the property line on the east.
yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah.
with it.
I'm just saying in terms of this, if you look at that lot size, probably that's not an issue. Even the structure with the new deck and the garage. Now I'm drawing a blank on the lot coverage,
I believe it's in the R20 zone. I believe it's 15%,
15%.
which would be 3,600 about square feet. And we're coming in at about 2,500 square feet.
For everything.
Proposed, yes, everything, yeah.
Okay, so that does not seem to be a problem. Other questions, commissioners? I sure hope somebody has that motion. Does someone have a copy of the motion? I bet not.
Yes.
You do? Good. That's one thing I neglected to point out for tonight.
Have it.
So is there a motion on this proposal?
Well, I guess I'll make the motion just to get the conversation.
Okay,
I motion to determine that based on the potential impact on neighborhood architectural harmony and character, property values, historical integrity, and/or public health and safety, the level of review deemed appropriate for this application is a site plan review under section 2.26.6.5, and to both waive all specific submittal requirements that are not included in this application because they would not aid the commission in its determination of the application's compliance with section 2.26, and to accept the application as complete, and to approve the application of Ryan Baller for certificate of design appropriateness to build a 25-foot by 38-foot 3-car garage, 18 feet tall, to be used for storage of a boat and for workshop at 40 Elm Street, Noank, Connecticut, because it meets the criteria set forth in section 2.26 of the zoning ordinances for the Noank Fire District.
is there a second to that motion? Blake Powell seconds. Beth Steele's motion. Okay, discussion on the motion then.
I mean, I will say, yeah, the stone obviously isn't, the surrounding properties don't have any stone. He does make a good point. I mean, it's not uncharacteristic for the village. There is some stone facade, not only there, but I don't know about the whole thing. That's the only building I can think of that has the entire stone facade. But it's not like it may not be, it may be atypical, but it's not by itself.
Yeah. Well, our obligation is to use our best judgment as elected zoning commissioners to decide whether it fits. I have the same concern. If the application came in with a shingled sidewalls or clapboard sidewalls, I'd be more satisfied with the thing, but I don't know that the stone in my mind is a disqualifier. It's just, it's a bigger reach than the siding of the properties that are around it. And I was almost hoping that, there was a different reason. Certainly the Historical Society is too far away to be something that you're trying to match. The whole point of the design review is to match the close surrounding properties. And having said that, a stone facade on a garage, if it was a house, I might feel more strongly opposed, but for a garage back off the far corner of the property, I don't know if that's, it's certainly not disqualifying in my view. If it was shingled or clapboard, it would be, I'd be more comfortable with it, but I'm not going to vote no on an outbuilding with a different facade than other properties around it. Blake.
Yeah, Blake Powell. I was just gonna say, I think the applicant's point that it's gonna blend in with the surroundings still applies, whether it's not stone on houses. There's plenty of stone walls that look very similar in that style and that color and shape of stone. And I think it'll blend in well with the surroundings and look very nice.
Okay.
I have no concern with that.
Anybody else? Yeah.
I would also note, like when I first looked at this application the other day, I was thinking about the size of it, but I know the house right behind him's got some wacky 3-car garage, and the one across the street's got a 3-car garage. I mean, so it's in keeping with the size of the garages in his
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Yeah. It's becoming the norm in that corner of Noank. Yeah.
Yeah.
Others, Dana? Anything further? No? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 4. Those opposed, there are none. So motion passes. And okay, Ryan, you can see Bill to get your permit, but you got to see him next week because he's
Yep.
probably gone by now.
Yeah, okay.
Good enough.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Now the next one on the agenda was Russell Sargent from Mystic River Homes. We notified him today that we would not be considering his proposal tonight. He had to get some documents to us in a format that we could put up here on the screen, and he apparently did not. I don't know if he got the message or couldn't get it done by the deadlines. Had to be in by last night. So I see you raising your hand. Are you representing him?
I am here for Mystic River Homes. I'm not sure who Russell Sargent is.
He's the architect who's designing the remodeling and the rebuilding of that upper building.
Okay, that was designed several years ago by Russell Sargent. I put the application in. My name is Andrew Woodstock.
Oh, well, we're going to have to deal with this in December because we went on the basis of, I believe, the application. We needed documents like you just saw, all in PDF format that I could put up here. And we needed them by yesterday because the governor's rule on running these meetings is they all have to be available for public inspection 24 hours before.
Okay, well, nobody contacted me to let me know this.
I know because we kept trying to contact Russell Sargent because he was the architect on the forms. I'm guessing that that was a mistake on our part somehow because I don't even know where those are now. Here's the application.
Right.
So I don't know how it became Rusty Sargent, but in any case, I apologize for that if that was our fault. I don't know. Sounds like we need to, you need to probably contact the Noank Fire District zoning email, and I'll make sure Bill knows you're the applicant of record.
I did sit with Bill and go through the applications.
Yeah.
Sure what the confusion is.
Me either now, but I can't solve it either. And since we didn't have the things by last night or yesterday afternoon, we're precluded from considering the application. So we'll just have to do it in December, and I apologize for that.
Okay.
All right.
Could we make sure that my name is on this?
Yes, I definitely will do that. And let me have that right now, so I'll write it down in these notes.
The name is Andrew Woodstock.
Andrew. For Mystic River Homes. All right, I will talk to Bill tomorrow about that and set it up for December.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
you're welcome. Next application is Peter Springsteel for Stephen Mansfield on Elm Street, application 233 Elm Street for an addition and renovations. And I do not, there's Peter, okay. And you're unmuted.
Okay,
Hold on, let me get this thing up. All right, here's the application. It's for an addition. And the checkoff list is complete and Bill signed off. Okay, Peter, the way I have these documents that you submitted to us, I've got them in 4 batches because they were of such good size.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to tell me which one you want and I'll pick it out and put it up there.
sure. We could start out with that. It says Mansfield zoning 24 by 36. That's the neighborhood photos.
Everybody see that? Okay,
So this house, you can see where it's located on Elm Street. It's a couple houses before you get to Tryon Avenue on the left side, across the street from the water. And the house is built in 1940. It's a modified cape that has a walkout on the left-hand side. So it sits up kind of high on a little hillock, to give you the context. And then you can see most of the houses in that neighborhood are similar, mostly 1-story capes and modified capes with dormers. There are a couple newer ones in there that are a little different, but in general, they're fairly consistent in terms of the lower profile and dormered features that are on them. And they're all in about that same age range too, most of them, 40s, 50s, and probably even 30s. Some of the newer ones are across the street on the water side, or the ones that have been remodeled extensively. So let's go, Rick, to, what else do I have here? Do we have an existing conditions file? That's proposed. Looks like they all say proposed, so just
yeah,
try it.
unfortunately, I renamed them. This the one, or I'll keep?
Well, yeah, this one's good. It's this is a 3D drawing viewed from Elm Street as you'd be going south. The addition here is on the right-hand side. It's the L that comes off the building. The chimney and that front door on the left, that's all the existing part of the house. So what we're proposing is the piece on the right there. And then this is a head-on front elevation from Elm Street. So again, the existing house is on the left. We've got a front door and that small bump out, that masonry chimney is existing, and the gable roofs on the left are existing. The additions on the right. And this is the existing left side of the house. There's really no change in this facade. This is the way it looks today, and this is more or less how this would stay. This is the walkout side of the house. So there's really no change in this facade. Scroll down, Rick.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that our missing member hasn't joined us.
Ah.
Okay.
So this is the rear of the house that faces west. And the addition is on the left side here. We're basically taking a roof line that presently exists. It's a very steep roof line, and we're just telescoping it out to the left there. And again, it's a one-story addition, so it's not really competing with the main structure. Go to the next one. And then this view is from the, this is the right-hand side. This will be the north elevation. And then that steep gable on the right and the roof that is perpendicular to that, the gable that's perpendicular to that is the addition. That steeply pitched gable roof is actually an extension of an existing roof. So that steeply gabled roof already exists as an architectural element on the building. So we're just extending that further to the north. This is the first floor main living level. On the right-hand side, you have the addition. There's a kitchen you can see there. So there's already a little bump out to the right that houses the kitchen. So we're extending that out further to the right, right up to about the setback line. And we've got a little living area in there and a bedroom and a bathroom. Go to the next one. That's the end. So why don't we go to one of the other files?
That's a site.
Yep, so there's a site plan. You can see the addition on the right-hand side. We've got it dashed in, so it's highlighted. That addition is set back from the front of the house, so it keeps the main front of the house still as the dominant element as you drive by the house. And in those renderings, you can see we're basically copying a lot of the gable vocabulary that's already on this building. We got the same kind of returns, same materials, same window types. And we're just kind of repeating them in the addition. And went through all the zoning with Bill. We have our zoning chart on the right-hand side there. This lot is, I think, about 19,000 square feet. And we're pretty far under the allowable lot coverage. We're in the R20 zone. You're allowed 15%, and we're still well under that. And then I think the last file is the existing conditions drawings. So we're at 10.9% with this proposal.
Did you want that back? I thought you wanted to go.
No,
to
no, that's okay, Rick. It just, I think the bottom one there. No, guess not.
That's the,
Okay, so this is an existing conditions drawing. This shows you the first floor plan on the left, what's there today, and then on the right is the basement. It's a walkout basement. And then we have some existing elevations too. I think it is scroll down, yeah. So there's the house today. You can see that steep gable in the upper right. We're just extending that gable there. And the drawing on the bottom right shows you the left side of the house, which we're really not changing. And then front and rear elevations are over on the left side. So in summary, we're really just taking the existing vocabulary of this house that was built in the 40s, and we're basically continuing it, maintaining the same kind of rhythm of windows and doors. We've got a little canopy and bracket over this secondary door. You can see in that elevation upper left there.
right here.
Again, that addition is set back from the road, so you won't see it as prominently as you do in the elevation, because the hill goes up and then it drops back. Same kind of trim details, same kind of window details. I'm missing a couple of muntins in the windows in that front dormer. They should be there. It should be 6/1, just like the rest of the house. So that's a little bit of a mistake there. Same thing on the lower right. There's a little window there. Yep.
Right here. Did you say it's all going to be cedar shingled like the existing?
Yeah, we're going to match all the materials that are in the house. On the trim, we may use a composite rather than real wood, but it'll be painted, so that'll all match. You won't know the difference.
Uh-huh.
And same kind of roof shingles, asphalt roof shingles
All right.
that are on the house now.
Okay, let's see. That's existing. Okay. All right, so let me see. That was that. We did that, we did that, we did that. So that's all of them.
Yes,
Okay, so do you have anything else you want to add to it or no?
I think that covers it. I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, commissioners, questions? Beth?
Do we have photographs of this as it exists now?
I don't know if there's one on the board there.
I didn't see it, but if you could point my attention to it. I just Googled it to see exactly what house it was because I didn't see it on
It might be one of them in here, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it.
No. It's the shingles look like that, Beth. And the
Yeah,
roof is pretty much this weathered wood on this 250 elm. It's that kind of a shingle design with white trim around the windows. It's a house with a big old copper beech out in front of it as you drive by.
Well, I Googled it, so now I know what it is.
Oh, you do?
I
Okay.
just thought that part of the application was supposed to be existing photographs, isn't it? So we can gather what we're,
well, I provide existing conditions drawings. I guess that doesn't show you the colors, but does show you the forms and vocabulary of the building.
Yeah, I don't know if the photos are a requirement or a rendition, an architectural drawing of the property.
I thought we had kind of going back and forth about this quite a bit. I know that's one of Nip's sticklers, and I thought there were supposed to be photographs. But I mean, here nor there, I've looked at it online, so I
Okay.
familiarized myself with it. But in the future, I think, that we should have photographs, because an artist's rendition is one thing, an actual photograph is much more helpful to me anyway.
I'll make a note of that for the future. We always need photos of existing structure.
And I don't think that's something new. I thought that was what we had talked about a long time.
Yeah, I honestly don't know, except I thought if you had an architectural drawing, that's not an artist's rendition, it's the architect's drawing of what it looks like in a floor plan and all of that. I thought that was the requirement and the photos were extra, but I could be wrong. I don't recall.
What does the checklist say, Rick?
Application, one copy
Of photos or
photo of
drawings.
each structure shown
Because you
on
can have drawings instead of photos, so I guess that's what it is.
original and 7 copies of photos or drawings of current structure. That's kind of how I had remembered it.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
I mean, I personally, and I'm not going to change this now, obviously, but I think that
We
at
can
least
add that.
one photo would be helpful in the future, so we know, most of us are familiar with pretty much every house, but something like this one, I just didn't know what it was, and to see an actual picture is helpful. Just
Yeah.
one, even if it was one on the board.
Well, as long as it's not inconsistent with the blue book, I'll talk to Bill about it and we can just change the instructions to applicants to do that as a clarification. If the blue book doesn't say it exactly that way, then of course we'd have to do a text amendment. But for now, though, I think the application has met the requirement. So other questions? Okay. No other questions. Where is my other member? Dana. Did Dana leave? That's weird. I wonder if he had technical difficulties. Wouldn't be the first time we have one of those. Okay, we still have a quorum. So is there a motion on this application? Beth?
I make a motion to determine, based on the potential impact on neighborhood architectural harmony and character, property values, historical integrity, and/or public health and safety, the level of review deemed appropriate for this application is a site plan review under section 2.26.6.5 and to both waive all specific submittal requirements that are not included in this application because they would not aid the commission in its determination of the application's compliance with section 2.26, and to accept the application as complete, and to approve the application of Stephen Mansfield for certificate of design appropriateness for a single family addition at 233 Elm Street, Noank, because it meets the criteria set forth in section 2.26 of the zoning ordinances for the Noank Fire District.
Is there a second to that motion? Blake Powell, second. Discussion on the motion? Seem to have lost one of our members. We still have a quorum. Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, passes 3-0. So Peter, you can see Bill for the permit next week.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, next item on the agenda. Review of minutes. These were distributed to you. They've also been up on the OneDrive, so anyone who wanted to see them could do so. You've had a chance since last Thursday or so to read them. There are the meetings of October 20th and November 4th. Any comments, changes, corrections to the minutes? Seeing none. Without objection, we'll call those approved. Is there any objection? See none. So the minutes of October 20th and November 4th meetings are approved. There is no zoning enforcement officers report tonight. We'll do 2 of them next month at the December meeting. So now we're to, anybody want to add new business, or we'll go right to old? Okay, I am going to, let's see. All right. First item of discussion is the FEMA Noank rules for remodeling homes. I had spoken to Bill and I thought he was going to get on by 7:30 if he at all possibly could. He had to leave Noank, go back to his office in East Lyme and get on that way. Is that Bill there in the upper right? It is. There he is. Okay, good. You have to hit your unmute button, Bill. Little red thing in the. Do you see the red icon? Okay, we're not getting audio from you. Great. It tells me that you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Bill, hit the leave the meeting icon and then rejoin it. Okay? Okay, in the meantime, this discussion is going to be based on this letter from Ann Bergendahl in August. She made the point that it's a hardship sometimes for people with the 10-year rule that we have in place in Noank for remodeling. In other words, 50% of the value of the structure over a 10-year period is the baseline. If you go beyond that over the 10-year period, you have to either elevate your structure or otherwise make it FEMA compliant, which can be very expensive. So people will tear the house down rather than spend all that money trying to raise an old structure. 1 year solves that problem, but it also poses an opportunity for people to do a bit of remodeling 1 year and a bit of remodeling the next year, and then they never, you have no chance of having a FEMA non-compliant structure ever become compliant. So there's two ways of looking at this. Most of the towns, according to her, and I think Bill more or less confirmed that, they're in the 1 year range now, where East Lyme and Noank went to 10 years in 2011. Most towns have gone to 1 year. Fundamentally, what it means is you can save old structures and have them remodeled in place, and you don't lose the architectural goodness of your community with old Victorian houses or colonial capes or whatever that otherwise would be torn down under the 10-year rule. So from an architectural preservation point of view, 1 year is better. 1 year lets people play with you a little bit. So maybe it's better to have 2 years. So that's reminding us of where the debate was. And Bill is not yet on again with us. So are there any areas? Okay, connecting to audio. Let's see.
If you can hear me, anybody, I can't hear you at all. I'm really messed up here.
Can you hear me, Dana? Dana, can you hear me? Yeah, doesn't sound like it. Bill, can you hear us? Speak. We can't hear you. Great. How about Beth, can you hear me? Yes. And Dana can't. And Bill can hear, but he can't speak. Blake, you hear us okay? Yeah. All right. So 3 of us can be heard. Dana can't hear us. And we can't hear Bill. Great.
Unbelievable. What do I do?
Not sure. I'm still pondering that for a minute. Let's just hang loose for a minute and see what happens. All right, looks like Bill's going off too again.
try it again.
You still not hearing us? Dana, do you still not hear us? Dana? Oh. Oh, maybe he did. Do you hear us now, Dana? Can you hear us, Dana? You do, okay. So Beth, Blake, Dana, and I.
How's that?
Bill, you're on too. Good.
You hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. All right. So we have our 4 commissioners. I don't think Nip Tanner is going to join us. It's almost an hour into the meeting. So I'm going to ask Lynn Marshall to sit for him if she can get back on screen. She was on a moment ago and then went to just audio. So Lynn, if you join us, we'll seat you for Lynn, for Nip, if you're so inclined. But if not, let's start, get in to this FEMA debate. Bill, I had kind of teed it up based on Ann Bergendahl's letter. And the upshot was 10 years means you have to, there's more chance that you're going to tear a house down rather than remodel it. Whereas 1 year is more chance that you'll retain and remodel the house in place. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Essentially, the bottom line is if you reduce the years, you're encouraging more remodeling because you can perform what's called the substantial improvement instead of every 10. It could be once a year, every couple of years. I also sent you an email, I don't know if you saw it, from the state DEP. I have a contact there that essentially oversees the FEMA program in the state of Connecticut. And she said we could go to 1 year or whatever number we choose to do. By going to less years, you are essentially encouraging remodeling along the shorefront. So you're still going to be compliant with the FEMA requirements if you go to 1, 2, 3, or anything up till 10. The 10-year really pushes you to consider becoming FEMA compliant by elevating the structure up to about 2 feet above the base flood elevation, depending on the flood zone you're in. The AE and the VE FEMA zones are now treated equally. So that either zone you're required to be up on piers, and they now want you to be 2 feet above what they call the BFE. And so it's up to the commission what you choose to do. It's a choice. Some towns are scaling back, others are kept it. Most of this is driven by the insurance industry, and FEMA is pushing that. Obviously, they've had substantial losses over the last 10 years nationally. And they're looking for everybody to become compliant. But with that said, when you look at a historical village like Noank, do you want to see every house on the waterfront up on piers? Well, architects can do wonders if somebody's willing to finance that improvement. When you buy a house on the waterfront, you may be able to purchase it, but you're immediately going to want to make improvements, usually a kitchen and bathrooms. And if the building is only worth $200,000, just the structure, because it's exclusive of the land, so you're looking at purely the structure, and those numbers are established by a certified appraiser in the state of Connecticut. And we require that so that we have a number and we know what to use, and so we know the value of the building. You're allowed 50% improvement over 10 years. The building's worth 200. You're getting 100,000 over 10 years. To maintain the house, to make improvements to it. Not a large number. Even if it's worth 3, you're looking at 150,000 over that period of time. If it's worth 600 or $1 million, you're looking at 50% of that number. There's no right or wrong. I think it's a whatever feels appropriate at the local level. I think with a lesser number, you're encouraging more maintenance and more investment into the existing structure, maintaining the local character of whatever that property may be. As I noted, I did get an email from the state that said, if you go to 1 year, you're still FEMA compliant. So I think it's a choice of the commission. Now, what we have discovered over the years that if it's 1 year, folks will wait till in November, they'll have an ambitious program so that in year one, in November, they can do 50%. And then they wait till the next year, which is January, they can do another 50%. So that may be considered somewhat detrimental to the intent of the program, depending on your point of view.
Okay, thank you. And Lynn, my intent is, I don't know if you had heard that, my intent is to seat you for NIP. Are you willing?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So Lynn Marshall, who is an elected alternate commissioner, is now seated for Arthur Tanner. So the 5 members are Powell, Steele, Oviatt, Marshall, and myself. Okay. Discussion on this issue. Dana.
Bill, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Do you recall, or does anybody recall what the rationale was for specifically picking 10 years when that decision was made, however long ago it was, as
Well-
opposed to 5 or 1 year?
I could shed some light on it. I don't know if I can give you the specific answer. FEMA came out with a menu some years ago, and they required all the local communities in Connecticut to update their regulations. They provided a menu. Certain parts of the menu you had to adopt, and other parts were optional. They gave us a choice on the 10-year, and they left it to the local community. They didn't provide a rationale why they chose 10. Now, I will share, I've done a lot of FEMA work over the years, particularly over here in East Lyme, and I've taken a lot of the FEMA classes, and I'm certified in a lot of what they require. And as I said earlier, most of this is driven by insurance. I find their programs can be questioned at times. They're not imperfect. Why they chose 10, I think that might have been a negotiation with the insurance industry when the feds decided to draft this. When we chose 10, it was the most restrictive. When the commission chose to do that, we did the same thing over here. And I think the rationale was, well, FEMA's looking at this, we might want to be the most restrictive to encourage people to comply, to elevate their homes, to get them out of flood zones. Well, I think over time that view may or may not have changed. I know some communities, I think Stonington, I think Rick said that they had gone down to 1 year, is my understanding too. I did ask my FEMA contact at State DEP whether she had any documentation on how many folks have gone to the 1 year or versus the 10, or what the numbers were statewide. She did not have that documentation. I also had asked how many structures in Noank were in the flood zone, and did we have that information? And her suggestion was that she said she did not, and suggested that if we wanted that information, we'd have to go out and beat the weeds and put that together ourselves. And not that it would solve any problems, it just give you a bigger picture. And quite frankly, almost everything on the shoreline is in the flood zone. Probably within, I would say, usually within 100 feet. As we know, the topography in Noank Village goes up very quickly to greater heights, but along the immediate shorefront, it's mostly, particularly facing east, is in a VE zone where you get wave action in a 100-year storm event that's going to run inland, and so that's why they look for the elevation on piers or pilings up above the base flood elevation plus 2 feet. But to answer your question, I don't have a specific. And why?
Yeah, I was specifically asking why the Noank Zoning Commission chose 10 years.
And I think they were taking the conservative approach at the time.
Okay.
Just as an aside or as an add-on point of interest here, when Dana and I were emailing back and forth about this the other day, and then Larry said, you can get on the town of Groton's GIS site and get a map with all the structures on it based on AE and VE zones. So I looked at the map and just counted structures on that map roughly. I didn't spend my life doing it, but out of approximately 700 houses in Noank, about 100 of them are in AE, or VE. All are part of the structure, which means if any part of the structure is in the zone, all of it is.
Correct.
So it's like 1 in 7, if the 700 is a reasonably accurate number for all the structures in Noank. So, and Bill's right, it's the periphery of the peninsula is where they all are. So, other questions? Blake?
Yep, this is Blake Powell. Bill, thanks for taking some time to answer questions from us too. But my question was, how often does this issue come up in applications or potential applications when they run it by you?
Well, typically what will happen is, because I have a baseline of knowledge, when an applicant comes in and wants to do a modification to a home, I have a reasonable knowledge to anticipate that they may be in a flood zone, certainly, based on address, based on the map, and I have the FEMA maps in the office. I have all of them. And so if necessary, we pull those out and make a determination. Technically, it's on the onus is on the applicant to provide that information. However, I have learned over the years, we want to look too, and we want to I want to ensure that any information we give to a potential applicant or any applicant is correct. So you have to cross-check those maps. And once we establish they're in a flood zone, and then we start with the criteria. What do you want to do? Substantial improvement? You want to knock it down? So on any property that I can anticipate maybe in a flood zone, I have to take a look. Percentage-wise, it depends on, as you know, a lot of properties are in the flood zone. As Rick pointed out, maybe approximately 100. Certain areas, Noble Avenue, for example, all of that's in a flood zone, so going in, anything down in that area is going to be in a flood zone. Parts of the peninsula, anything on the shoreline is going to be in a flood zone. You can even have flood zones in inland areas where there are rivers and streams, but by and large, in Noank, it's all coastal.
Other questions?
If you tear a house down, then you are going to have to raise it. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. If you remove the structure and it's in the flood zone, to build new, you're required to comply with the VE and AE standards if you're in either one of those zones. So the house would have to be elevated to above the base flood elevation. I believe, and I'm going from recall along, we're at about, I think, 14 on the waterfront. And I think the land mass along the waterfront is probably about 6 feet. So you're looking at approximately 8 feet to 10 feet in elevation from average finished grade to the bottom of the lowest beam in any structure. And those are essentially guesstimates, but I think you'll find they're relatively close.
So if the house is torn down, then you have to go with the existing zoning regulations on setbacks, lot coverage, height.
That's correct. If you
You can
remove
lose quite a lot.
you could lose quite a lot. In addition, you're going to bump up to your height requirement of 25 feet. And if you're going to be up on piers 6, 8, 10 feet, you're now deducting on the top from the top of the house on the height. As you know, you replace the 30 feet with 25. And in some areas like Groton Long Point, they add on for the elevated portion of the structure, but that puts the top of a house at 40 feet in the air, and that can adversely affect the character of a neighborhood depending on your point of view.
I have another question.
Dana?
So following up on Lynn's question, Bill, is there any, theoretically, I'm not sure how to ask this, theoretically, if somebody raised their house, that is, if they destroyed it and then built again, and they have all these limitations, you have to raise it, but Noank zoning has a limitation on how high your house can be. Do you run into the problem that you just can't build a house anyway?
No, I haven't run into that problem because based on the regulations, the way they're written, you can always build a house. It may not be the house of choice. You could put a one-story house on piers. You might not get the second story. You might get a story and a half. You know, if you've got a good architect, he might be able to come up with something attractive. But those restrictions can, depending on your view, impose severe restrictions or some restrictions. Now, with that said, everyone has the opportunity to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals to seek relief from the regulations. You have to have a hardship either on the land or within the regulation. And you've got to make that case, and you have to have a legal hardship in order for the Zoning Board of Appeals to grant you relief. But it is available to folks who feel aggrieved. Let's say, for example, you are short on height and your house might come in at 27. You could go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and seek a variance of 2 feet. You might grant it depending on your argument and how you present it and what the evidence in the record is. And it would, obviously they would vote. But that is an opportunity. Beyond that, any remedies would be text amendments or Superior Court. You'd have to make a valid claim that the zoning regulations have caused a great grievance for you, but you'd still have to be turned down by me. You would then go to ZBA claiming the zoning guy doesn't know what he's doing. And from there, if they upheld me, you would be off to Superior Court. But even that process, you know, I'm going to apply the regs based on the code. And so I'm pretty comfortable in that. So that process may not really lend itself to any great success for the homeowner. Essentially, that building envelope is controlled by setbacks, lot coverage, building height, and FEMA.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we did with our house. We had it raised and then we went to the zoning board and appealed, and they gave us the permission to go above the height.
But you were not tearing down the house, and you were preserving a historic house. So that was, you know.
The only way I would move to Noank is if we preserve the house.
Dana, make sure I understand this. So when you elevated your structure, the top end of the house started to exceed the 25-foot height restriction from ground level, because it's not, FEMA requires you to go up, measure to the first floor, but the height restriction goes from the ground. So by adding that 6 feet or so that you added, you're saying the peak of the roof went over that height, and that's why you had to go to ZBA.
That's my understanding, yes.
So the house structure didn't change. It just
Not at all.
it
No.
opened up. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I could see how that could pinch somebody, and you might end up with a very pancake looking house.
Well,
But if they just raise the original house, they can actually get a higher house, potentially a little better view. And that could be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, they would still have to comply they would still have to comply with the height requirement on an existing house. If you're going to raise it and put it up on piers, you still have to comply with the existing height requirements. Let's say, for example, the house came in at 20 feet, you still can't go in above 25 without a variance.
Yeah, that's what I just asked about Dana's.
Yes,
The house never changed. It's
Right.
just the orientation to the ground changed.
right. So what happens is ZBA now gets a lot of business, and will they treat everybody equally and grant variances for height because of the imposition of FEMA? Well, the question is that a legal hardship? Not for us to decide. I imagine there's case law on it. Connecticut, I'm unfamiliar with it. But this restriction, essentially, particularly with the 25 feet, if you're forced to go up on piers, you may end up getting these flat roof type structures, or with very shallow pitched roofs, which are in many people's minds architecturally not pleasing, depending on your view of architecture. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
But then that would not pass design review.
That's a very that's a possibility, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions, commissioners? when we started discussing this back in the summer sometime, I thought it was worthwhile to have a discussion and make sure we understood exactly what was being asked and whether we agreed. This, to make a change, would require a text amendment, which would be the two notices. Well, we'd have to notify a couple of different agencies and then a couple of notices in the newspaper. We'd have to decide what we want to propose, whether we want to change the 10-year to something different. And then decide when we want to do this, because of the obvious, we have a 800-pound gorilla on our shoulder that we're trying to rationally come to a conclusion on. And my concern was this not get in the way. But we did decide to put some time into a couple of agendas and put ourselves in a position of saying right now, what would you like to do? So, Commission, what would you like to do with this?
Well, I think the one point that we haven't really brought up that I think is an important consideration as well is the taxpayer. So from the point of view of taxpayer, you have people in these coastal communities that come and spend a lot of money, for the lot to be and have a waterfront property, and then they put a lot of money into the property, and then they put a lot of money in the property, and then a storm comes, and there's a good chance that there would be a lot of damage to that property, and that damage then is borne through the insurance by the taxpayer. So that was the whole purpose of having them raised, I think, is to save money for the taxpayer. So I think that's an important consideration here as well.
Well, that argues in favor of retaining the 10 years.
That would be.
Yeah.
So Rick, are you asking for discussion as to whether we should have a public hearing on it? I'm confused as to how we
No,
proceed.
I'm asking whether you want to change the 10-year to something like 1 or 2, or any number between 1 and 10. We have the option of deciding which number of years we want that 50% of structure value thing to apply to. And so far, we've just been debating what are the pros and cons. And I want to see if there's a consensus that you're comfortable with a different number. If you aren't, we leave it at 10, but you lose possibly some architecturally significant properties that get torn down because they can't be elevated. If you go to 1 or 2, maybe you save some architecturally desirable properties because the owners decide, they're going to renovate the existing structure and keep it, even though, as Lynn points out, there is some storm risk, and yeah, there's a taxpayer burden because flood insurance is subsidized. They're subsidized insurance rates, although they're phasing those out. I just, before we decide whether to have a hearing or not, I would like to see if there's any sentiment for changing the 10-year number at all.
I have a different, slightly different viewpoint, and I'd like to read it to you if you don't mind.
Okay.
At the risk of being slightly long-winded, but I want the commission to understand that this issue has to be looked at in the context of impending sea level rise that is occurring all along the Connecticut coast. Last January, Nip Tanner, I'm sorry he's not here tonight, recently sent a message to the commission asking them to become aware of the effect that sea level rise has on coastal flooding and how it might impact decisions that the zoning commission makes. In his letter, he stated that the average of the 30 highest high tides had risen about a foot since 1980, and it's projected that there will be 60 flood events per year by 2050. The federal government shares NIP's concern. Since 1990, FEMA has had a program called the Community Rating System. The system is a program that rewards owners who have houses in flood zones by offering reductions on the cost of their flood insurance premiums between 5 and 45%. It does this by ranking the owner's community based upon their efforts to mitigate damage due to floods. Specific examples include providing educational materials to the public, providing open space, and so forth. Jesse Stratton and Zell Stever are the experts on this from Groton Conservation Advocates. And it's my understanding that they're trying to encourage Groton to participate in this particular program. So my point is that the zoning commission should be making decisions that are consistent with the threat of sea level rise and with FEMA's attempts to mitigate damage to properties that lie in flood zones. So those are my general comments. And I have specific comments with respect to the actual letter and proposal that was submitted. And these are: number one, if 10 years is too long, I think that 1 year is too short. A 1 year look back encourages owners to avoid mitigating the risk of flood damage, when we all know that mitigating the risk of flooding is what we need to do in order to deal with impending sea level rise. We don't want to perpetuate the vulnerability of properties due to floods, which is what a 1 year look back period would do. And number two, surrounding towns may in fact have 1 year look backs, but this shouldn't make any difference to us in our decision unless we know specifically what the rationale was in their decision to have a 1 year look back. Three, it's stated that a 10-year look back has the ability to ruin Noank's historic buildings because the owner would be forced to tear down the house or elevate it. I'm not sure I agree. If an owner wants to elevate, they can do so and maintain the original historic feel of the house. There are at least 3 examples of elevated houses in Noank, and one of them is mine. Saying that elevating a house disrupts the feel of Noank history might be saying that solar panels disrupt it as well. And finally, if an owner feels it's necessary to tear down a house, hopefully the zoning board will make sure that it meets Noank standards. Most buyers are going to want to keep the original house unless it's so decrepit that it doesn't make sense to rehab and elevate. So basically, I guess my point is, I'm not sure that it should be 10 years or something a little bit less, but 1 or 2 seems not in keeping with what we're trying to accomplish along the Connecticut coast. And if we're really serious about preserving Noank's historical houses, the commission should want to encourage owners to upgrade their houses to FEMA standards so that these historic houses can withstand rising waters. That's it for me. I just didn't want to discuss short-term rentals tonight.
A masterful attempt at, what do you call that? There's a word in politics, filibustering. Basically, if I could put that in a nutshell, you think all things considered, we might be better off for Noank and insurers and everybody else if we just left it at 10.
I think the more the better. If we left it at 10, I wouldn't be disappointed.
Yeah, that's kind of how I interpreted what you said. Bill.
As far as the CRS program goes, just a bit of information for you. I'm a certified CRS guy. I run the program over here in East Lyme along with our town engineer. And in fact, I think it's the 15th of December, taking a 1 hour refresher because there are going to be some changes. So yeah, and he's absolutely correct. Groton has chosen not to get into it. There are my recollection is 16 towns, maybe 17 that are in the program. Also run by the same FEMA contact for the state that I have been talking to. So if we want any more discussion on that, I might be able to be helpful. I'm actually in my East Lyme office. All the books are here if we need them, and I certainly could borrow them. But that's an issue that's really going to be a townwide issue for the CRS program. And the benefit is that the town participates. Homeowners in the flood zones get a 10% discount. So the towns look at the effort to get to that end, and in some cases you have to have a dedicated staff person. You're paying them 50, 75 grand a year. So some towns have chosen to and some have not. Over here we divide it up, and we've been able to manage that between a couple of different guys and kind of do it on a shoestring, but it does take a bit of time. And getting back to the core issue, you as a group need to make a decision, as you know, of what you think is appropriate. As I noted earlier, FEMA's telling me that whether it's 1 or 10, you still be compliant, or 2 or 5. So certainly a choice of the commission.
Mhm.
Thank
Okay, thanks. Blake or Beth? Or, well, Blake or Beth first, then Dana. Beth?
I can see both points, and I definitely hear what Dana's saying. I mean, but I would be comfortable with the shift. I would not be comfortable with 1 or 2 years. I mean, I think the minimum should be 3, maybe 5. I mean, I get why 10 may be too much. That's just my, but I guess I would say between 3 and 5.
Okay. Dana or Blake, did you want to jump in or no?
No, I agree with what Beth is saying. There's clearly some arguments on both sides to do this. I think that if it was a shorter period of time, there's certainly nothing precluding people from raising their house and complying with FEMA standards, certainly. So I don't think even lowering the look back period necessarily would mean that everybody's going to just keep their house remodeled. There'll still be people that would raise it, I think, similar to what Dana did, and it clearly can be done and still meet architectural design review too. But I think having a shorter window of time certainly allows homeowners a little more flexibility on how they would approach it.
Okay, then Dana again.
Bill, what's the look back period in East Lyme where there's a program?
We chose 10 years as well when we as well as Noank had to modify our FEMA regulations, and I think it got it. I've got a list somewhere, but I think it might have been 8, 10, might be 10, 12 years ago. We chose 10 as well. I think the philosophy here was it's more restrictive. We want to be compliant with FEMA. We didn't have a lot of experience with the substantial improvement because it came out with these revisions. And, now we're hearing, not only here and in Noank and other parts of the state, we're getting some concerns about FEMA's impact under the substantial 50% rule. So we chose 10 over here. It has not been problematic. Tracking it, from a staff point of view is takes some time because we have some forms and stuff, and there's a lot of certifications, elevation certificates, all that stuff's required. We have to track it for 10 years, and at the end of 10 years, you can start over again on the 50%. But the staff in the towns have to track all that information, put it in the files. We have to get cost estimates from the contractors who are engaged so we can deduct from the 50% value. Is that system 100% accurate? I don't think it is. I had one case in Noank where an appraiser came in, an appraiser from inland up in the West Hartford area, did the appraisal and came in at $680,000. I thought the house was worth $3. I referred it to deep at FEMA. They came in at $320. However, the way the system's written, we had to take the appraisal or ask for a new appraisal. So there are some problems with the program, but that's FEMA's issue and not ours. But we did choose 10 here as well, and over time it's worked out. Our coastline is built up as well. We have, I don't think, any vacant lots on the waterfront, so it's all going to be knockdowns and rebuilds or substantial improvements, same as in Noank.
Can I follow up with that question?
Sure.
Because
Dana?
so did you specifically pick 10 years because if you had picked a smaller number like 1 or 2, it would have hurt your accumulation of points on the community rating system?
No, and I don't think it does affect the points on the community rating system because you're still FEMA compliant with 1 year or 10 years, so it doesn't affect points to your standing in the CRS program. There's a variety of things you can do in the CRS program to to achieve a greater reduction. But as I recall, and I'd have to double check on this, I don't think we can get, you can only, I think we're at an 8 or a 9 here, and I don't think we can get below a 7 in the state of Connecticut, no matter what we do. So that insurance availability and reduction, probably no more than 15%, depending on the outreach and how we run the program locally in each town, whether it's, and I think actually Stonington might have gotten out of that CRS program, as I recall hearing some discussion at one of the seminars. The program has some merit, but not every town participates in CRS. But with that said, I don't think it'd affect the point system if you went to 2 or 5 or 8, whatever you choose to do, because we're still FEMA compliant, and it's their set of regulations.
So I just want to make clear, it's your opinion that if Noank went to a 1-year look back period and Groton decided to participate in the community rating system program, it wouldn't affect our ability to lower insurance rates.
Yeah, I don't think it would. I'd have to go back and verify that and refresh, because I haven't looked at it in a while, but that's my recollection. But I would want to refresh on that before I gave a final answer. There's an awful lot going on in that program, but I certainly can find that answer pretty readily.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm interested in it, and I'll shut up after this, the only reason I'm interested in it is because it seems like one end of the government is fighting the other. You've got, this community rating program, but then you've got the federal insurance program. And
my experience is, I would agree with you. At one of the seminars I attended many years ago with the FEMA folks up in Windsor Locks, I asked the question that one of the things they allow is variances to be granted. So I asked the question, if we granted 300 variances, or in Noank's case 100 variances, from having to elevate, what would they do? Well, they gave me a nasty look, didn't want me to raise my hand anymore and ask any more questions. They said they'd pull the flood insurance program, but yet their very own program allows variances to be given, so they are at odds within their own system. When I took the CRS program, I took it in New London 2 years ago, and it was an all-week class, 8 to 5, and they meant 8 to 5 testing every 2 hours, and many of the instructors had come in from all over the country. So we had it was a pretty good group of people. It was very interesting, but the program is imperfect, like many of the FEMA programs. But it is what we have to work within. And so over here, and based on my experience here, it is what we have to work with, so we make the best of what we have, and we apply the program as directed by FEMA. We do have a resource at the state, and then if we run into greater issues, we can go to Region 1 up in Boston and contact them up there, which we do from time to time, if we get a very unique type of question or situation where it's unclear.
Okay. The tails have it. So Dana's been clear on his view. Anybody else? Oh, well, and Beth and Blake have too. Do you feel strongly enough that you could pick a number here and say, let's do a text amendment on that? Or would you like to mull it over? There's no rush. I mean, we can take the time we need to take to decide what we think the right thing is to do. I'm hearing a couple with 3 to 5. I hear one at 10. So Lynn, you didn't really weigh in with a number, I didn't think. You sort of leaned at the end towards 10 because of the way the whole thing is a subsidized program, so the taxpayer pays for the losses.
Yeah, I mean, I basically agreed with all the points that Dana was raising.
Okay.
So I would definitely be on the high end of that scale.
All right, so we got 2 at 10, 2 at 3 to 5. I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. I would not want to take a half an hour at every one of our regular meetings to mull it over more, but sometimes when, when we're all kind of still pensive about it, it's best to just leave it sit and not try and force a decision. So maybe we ought to have a bit of discussion next meeting and see if anybody solidified their views feel more strongly. So I would say let's just take this as a good discussion and move on. Anybody disagree with that? Okay. So let's do that. All right, the moment Dana was not waiting for. Under old business, further discussion of short-term rental issues. Here is what I would suggest we do since it's 8:30. One announcement, just I do this from time to time when we get correspondence. I received a letter today from an attorney representing some people in Noank, I don't know who, basically making a few points about some of the things we've talked about in the past. And, we've got this from homeowners too from time to time. And this time it's an attorney representing several homeowners. I will get it out tomorrow. I got it very late in the day and frankly didn't even have time to try and send it out and distribute it. So I'll do that tomorrow. I just wanted to let you know I had received that and you'll read about it tomorrow. Now, so what to follow on with our discussions, here's what I would suggest. The draft document I have revised based on last meeting. I would point out a few things as we scroll through, but my intention would be to deal with the last 3 or 4 things that we hadn't gotten to last time, and then we will have gone through everything in this kind of format and everything in that long matrix that we've been dealing with and everything in the short matrix. So if we get to the end of that tonight, I think that tees us up for the next meeting to look at the thing in the whole context and decide whether we're comfortable with it as a package. The next step of a decision-making process, if we agree with whatever we agree with, we send it to John Casey for him to review for legal purposes. Have we gotten ourselves in a problem area or not? And I think it's essential that we do that. The other thing Lynn had suggested a while back is make sure that every action we propose marries to one of the goals we set out with in our purpose statement back in the summer. I think that's worthwhile too. And I had told you I had gone through that exercise myself, and maybe for next meeting, that will be one of the other things we can do. We look at the whole package and we make sure that we're consistent with our goals. So having said that, I'm going to scroll through this and point things out where, like in this case, this is based on a motion. The apartment.
I'm gonna interrupt and say goodnight and let you.
Okay,
guys
Bill,
go forward.
thank you. All right.
Thank you, Bill.
Yep, good to see you all again. Stay safe, everybody.
Yeah, you too.
Take care.
Okay, if there's no objection with that approach, that's how I would do it. I'll just scroll through here, point things out. Like this one as an example, that's a motion we took at the last meeting, just to make sure you're comfortable with the way that is worded. Okay, it's a definition. It's not the measure. Separate section of our.
You can have a studio apartment, and I don't know if you would call that 1 or more bedrooms if it's a studio apartment.
Well, if it has 1 bedroom, it would fit, right? I mean, the bigger thing was the apartment had.
Studio is generally just 1 room that has living room,
Well, okay.
bedroom, kitchen all together.
Okay.
I don't know. That's just a question.
I think this language includes 1 bedroom and a kitchen, even if it's 1 room.
Okay.
That'd be my view. So events and large parties. This, we hadn't talked about exactly every word in here, and as a definition, I just thought you ought to read that for a minute and make sure you're comfortable with that. We've talked about the various things at different times.
the large parties, I guess it's on so many rentals that I see, there are like no parties or events. And now this is only limiting the large parties. And it ends up being based on the number of authorized persons in the rental party. And I think it's a little strange. So let's say that just me, I rent a large 2-bedroom house. And so because there's just one of me, then if I do any entertaining at all, I can have 2 guests in that house, even though it might have a nice, really, big dining room, living room, porch, everything. But if I rent a house with my partner, John, and 4 grandchildren, then there's 6 of us, then I can have 12 guests. It's the same house. In one case, we were only allowed to have 3 people. In the other case, we're allowed to have 18 people. So it seems like it's an arbitrary rule that I don't think makes a lot of sense.
What do you suggest?
I think that we leave it looser in terms of just saying no parties or events, or if
No, that's a different section. That's a management measure later on in the document. This is a definition. If you say no events and large parties, you have to tell the person being regulated what it is.
right, but where do you generally define, and it doesn't have to be large, I'm just saying parties, period. Does it have to be, does a party have to be defined?
If you want to regulate that activity, somebody's going to say, well, if you say an event, events are easy. Commercialized services, catered food and drink, disc jockey with microphone, amplified music, bright pulsating lights. That's an event. And the reader would say, well, okay, I know what my limits are. But if you say a large party, what is a large party? What is a party? Extra people to the rental party. It could be 1 more person if you want to, be very rigid. And I'm open to suggestion. That's why I said, what do you suggest?
Well,
And it was, don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. Well, if we're going to limit it to the number of people, then maybe it should be instead of the number of people who are actually renting, it should be the actual number of people that are allowed at a party, depending on, like, say, the number of bedrooms or something along those lines, so that the number is the same no matter how many people are renting.
All right. If you recall a past draft in the matrices that we had put up there, we had talked about 2 people per bedroom, no more than 4 bedrooms. And then a large party was twice that, and the group didn't like that. They wanted something different. I'm open to suggestion on this. Let's just leave it as something that this is the first time you've seen this language, and that's all I really want to do at 8:30, 8:40. I wanted to make sure you saw these 2 definitions, and we'll save action to a future time. Just think of an alternative for the next meeting. I'm going to skip right to that last page of things we've never seen before, because if we go at this rate, you had this as a draft, and you can be looking at it and deciding if you like the language for the next time we have a special meeting and can focus more on this. The things we had not talked about started here. Okay, we left off here where we decided the short-term rental permit period should be a calendar year. And now the next paragraph in yellow is, you can read that, see if you like the logic of it. And I put the language in that way for a reason on the fees, but it's a complicating factor. And this is why government always does annual permits for an annual fee, because you don't have to complicate it by, well, what do you do in 2 years? Do you get 2 annual fees every other year? It's why it's always an annual permit fee. The reason I wrote it this way, I thought, well, okay, it's a little bit of an advantage to somebody who's operated so well, there's been no complaints. They get to renew every 2 years and they only have to pay the fee, the 1-year fee every 2 years. So they're getting half off essentially. I don't know if we want to complicate things that much. It would apply to everybody. So it's not like it's a constitutional violation. It's a rule of general applicability, which is what a regulation is. But whose hand did I see? Larry. Larry Dunn, for the record, is an elected alternate commissioner, and by longstanding tradition, we have allowed our elected alternates to participate as members in the discussion, but not as voters. Lynn is a voter because she's seated for an absent member. Okay, thanks, Larry.
Okay. No, I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah,
Two things. One is I think it does overcomplicate things of trying to track 1 year, 2 years, but also the cost of compliance doesn't go down. There's some, depending on what we do. So we need to go with a support organization or a software organization, their costs stay the same. They don't give you a break. So I think that would then put the burden on the rest of the community to pay that reduction in fee for 2 years, or you'd have to estimate every year how many would be for 2 years and raise everybody's rate annual fee. So I just think it complicates things to no real advantage.
Yep. Okay. Everybody agree with that? Is there any disagreement with that? Just simply make it an annual permit renewal and an annual fee. Right? Okay.
One other comment.
Yep.
I just have come off of the town of Groton town council meeting.
Yep.
They decide.
So at an 8-0 vote, they agreed to pursue further investigation in how to address short-term rental, with a meeting the end of January to structure the mechanisms to do that investigation. How do you like that one?
Okay. That sounds like a very process-oriented decision.
Yeah. And there was an unanswered question that they're investigating of, does an ordinance trump a Noank zoning regulation?
Yeah.
Or does it, or it doesn't, if Noank doesn't do anything and it's you know what I mean? If Noank doesn't do anything, then I think they thought that any ordinance in Groton would apply. But if Noank zoning then executed a zoning change, that would override the ordinance. They're double checking that legal
That was
interpretation.
John's interpretation of the various laws. You recall back in the spring, he had to take some time to look at them because there are different ordinances, different statutes. But that's how I believe he came down on it. So
Yeah, well, that's kind of what they said. So anyway, that out of an hour and a half, guys, that was your 2-second net.
good. Well, thank you. I appreciate that update. Okay. You can read that green language and go back and read C2 at your leisure. Here are the 3 things we've never talked about. What do you do in the event? Well, let me back up here a little. Here's where it starts. Permit is revoked, is ineligible to apply for a new permit for a year. Second offense, it's permanently prohibited. I thought that was a little draconian. I mean, everybody's gonna, there are gonna be people who stumble with this, or they have renters that, to their best effort, they still, people misbehave, and it creates a little firestorm for a while. And I'm a little concerned about permanently prohibiting someone from short-term renting just because there was a second offense. So I propose this option 3A, 3B as a little bit more of a spread out period. So first time you get revoked for a year, second time ineligible for 3 years, third time permanent revocation. I don't know if that sounds better to you, or if you like the 1 year, second time you're out approach. So what do you think about that?
I guess when we're looking at offenses, that all offenses are not equal. And so let's say that you were renting more than, or more frequently than is allowed. That seems like a deliberate thing. And then, yeah, maybe a revocation would be in order. But if one time you didn't respond to a complaint within 20 minutes, once, really, I mean, it seems like if there would be a pattern there. Or if one time there was an inspection and your book wasn't quite in shape or something. I don't know. I just, is everything equal so that one single offense of any kind and you're out for a year?
Yeah, no, remember, we have the option as a commission to take a violation to hearing. We're not required to take every violation to hearing. Lots of things will be resolved, for example, by the zoning officer contacting the owner and saying, look, to use your example, I detected there's a record problem here, clean up your records. We don't have to go to a public hearing and revoke a permit for that. And there are a lot of things in here, if they stay in, I suspect will be dealt with in ways other than permit revocation. Permit revocation is going to be for the things that you can't resolve word of mouth between the CEO and the owner.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Any other views on this whole section at all? Not just the options for second or third, but just as Lynn points out, questions on the whole revocation of permit and penalties. You still read that? I'll try and get it all on the screen. Yeah, there.
Yeah, right.
Blake?
Yeah, it's Blake Powell. So I'm comfortable with what you just explained right there and what Lynn was explaining, but I'm not too sure that that's what these words say. I'm not real comfortable with the way this is written, actually.
Okay, I can go back and look at that to soften it. Sure.
Yeah, I interpreted it the same way Lynn did. I read it just now on the screen, but your explanation put a little different spin on it, which made more sense to me.
Well, it's always our right to decide not to have a hearing. That's why I said it that way. But I will look back at the wording in the context of what you and Lynn have said and see if I can't capture that better. Okay. Okay, others? All right, well, what's your pleasure, 1 and 2 or 1, 2, and 3 years? And I mean, because that's the essence of the highlighting here. Just so we know which way to write it, what's your pleasure? Second hearing-based offense that prevails, do you pull a permit forever or do you pull it for 3 years? And then the third revocation is permanently. Beth?
I like the tier system as it is written.
1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Any disagreement with that? Lynn?
Yes, I think I would tend toward the way it's originally written, because now you're talking about issues that could not be resolved. So there've been warnings, there've been discussions, and it cannot be resolved. So this is someone that that this is a repeated. So if you've already had one revocation and then you try again and they're still not getting it, it just seems like that's pretty serious. I wouldn't give them an.
I would agree it's serious, but I would also say a 3-year revocation for someone who wants to do short-term rentals is not an inconsequential penalty. Just permanent means you can't go back. You would have to go back and change your zoning regulation, your zoning ordinance, if you wanted to do something other than permanent revocation. And that seems to be kind of a nuclear option that I would rather have, you know, a little bit of,
I would not strongly object to
Yeah.
the tiered option. My preference is the other, but I would not
Yeah.
strongly.
okay, well, not everyone has weighed in, so let's see how others feel. Dana and Blake.
Blake, you can go first.
I'm not crazy about the permanent prohibition. I certainly agree with the intent of it and what you're saying, but I guess I would like to see, it all depends on the offense still in my mind, you know, that's why I'm not crazy about the permanent part. It really, it all depends. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't feel that way if someone came before us for 3 different times, and based on this, it would be 3 times over, what, 3, is it 5 years or something like that, you know? But
Or, yeah. And with hearing time in there, yeah, it could be at
that
5
could-
years before the permanent would kick in.
that could be just enough for me to want to make it permanent, but I think there should be some flexibility built into that. That's it.
Okay, let me give a try on that. We don't have to decide anything tonight on it. Be more flexible. Okay, so I'll try and draft a different set of words that soften the rough edges of this. Everybody agree with that? No disagreement? Okay. All right, in that case, we got 7 minutes and I hate wasting time. So let me just highlight a few things here for you to see as you look at the document. You can get it off the OneDrive. The public can too. It's out for the public to see. This was the one that we talked about. This is a family transfer. Well, actually, this occurs in 2 places. Once permit is issued, it's not transferable to another person, et cetera, in which ownership of the property, unless it's a situation where ownership of the property has been transferred by other than an arm's length transaction. Mull that over. There's no more family basis to this. It's the arm's length transaction. And clearly this is something that John will have to look at and give us advice on. I did a couple of little bit of word changes here. I left this one as we may monitor by any means practicable, including app-based monitoring applications. Just so, you know, if we decide there's a way for us to do this that doesn't require that, that's our choice. Lynn?
On number 2, wouldn't it be transferred by an arm's length transaction, not by other than? Because if it's an arm's length transaction, you're saying,
Okay, I'm trying to identify things for you to look at
Oh,
your
okay.
leisure and get back to me with comments. This is what we call by law a staff draft. So you can give me comments. I'm just identifying
Okay.
places, drawing your attention to them.
on to number 6.
And get me the comments and I will redraft. So that's just giving us discretionary authority there. This was the language on indemnification. Okay, we discussed it at length at the last meeting, so this is where the language is. This is a big one. This was that waiting period, and this is where in the past, we had that permit transfer exemption later in the document, and what you had said last week, actually it was Nip who had said it, If it only applies to the waiting period, why not put it right in here? So that's where I put it. You haven't seen this language yet, so take a look at it at your leisure and see if, and we'll discuss it at the next meeting when we're looking at the whole thing in its entirety. I added the quiet hours that Lynn had suggested to that title in number 5. Here's the other side of the discussion we started with. This is where the rule is. The other one was the definition. So events and large parties are prohibited. Apartments. That was our vote last week. Apartments shall not be eligible for use as short-term rental units. Here's the inspection issue. And there's more to that a little bit later. You'll see it in a minute. Information to renters. You had wanted this reordered so that the non-impairment of other residents' uses and the unruly behavior quiet time, the information we provided to renters was sequential, so I did that. Events also. Here is that obtaining the third-party records. This is in record keeping. In addition, the short-term rental operator authorizes a Noank zoning enforcement officer to obtain any STR information held by any third party to audit STR records. That was the consensus last meeting. I used some strikeout and underlining to suggest to me, it was a clearer way of wording this whole parking obstruction of emergency vehicle issue. So you want to read that one at your leisure as revised language to see if you're satisfied with that. This is the issue Nip had raised, which we voted to do. And it's in here now for you to see in the context of the overall parking section. We need John to advise us on that. That's no change, but we need that advice. The inspection issue. I think it was 2 meetings ago that we dealt with that one. And then the stuff we had just talked about. So that's kind of the green and the yellow, or green is what we had decided. Do you like the language? And yellow is maybe we still have a decision or two to make on them. So the only thing left other than those types of decisions are I need to prepare new language here for you to see and see if you're happy in it. I might have to put it in the revocation rule, you know, that it's the significant offenses that we're talking about for revocation. That's the sense of what I got from Blake. So now, any questions on that or things to clarify or other issues to be discussed, or we're at 8:59? I see none. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved by Blake, seconded by Beth. All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you all. As usual, I appreciate your efforts, and we'll talk again. Next meeting will be 2 weeks from tonight. That's the other thing. I think it's December 1st, but I'll get something out as an email to you so that you have that for your calendar. Okay. Thank you all. And thank you, Larry, for teeing me up on that. It actually worked out, which I was a little apprehensive about, but it worked out pretty well. I only had one hiccup, and it was with one of the applications for design review. So we'll fix that tomorrow.
Have you stopped recording, Rick?
Thank you. I'm going to stop share and then stop recording.